You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
We are continuing our hobby series, or as Sarah likes to call it, our happy hobby series here on The Coffee Hour.
They're all happy.
I don't know. Wait till we get to today's. It might just change. You never know. No, I think this is a happy hobby too, at least for our guest today. Looking forward to sharing with you another hobby here on The Coffee Hour. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin. Thanks for your support of The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, the Reverend Dustin Beck. He's pastor at Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Warda, Texas. And he has a fun hobby to share with us today. Pastor Beck, thanks for joining us on The Coffee Hour.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you guys today?
Not too bad.
Great.
Not too bad. Okay, good.
Not too bad.
Good, yeah.
Probably better after I try out his hobby. I think it's going to be fun. So normally our guests, our listeners probably hear Pastor Beck on Sharper Iron, studying the Word of God. But the Word of God is quite often referred to as a double-edged sword, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure enough.
We're not dealing with swords today, though. Tell us, what is one of your hobbies? I know you have many hobbies, lots of them that get you outside.
Yeah.
But the one that you've chosen to talk about today, Pastor Beck.
Well, I thought that we could talk about throwing objects, throwing sharp implements, as it were. And so knives, tomahawks, maybe even the occasional sharpened shovel, like a camp shovel. So yeah, throwing things. That's what we're talking about today.
Objects. I feel like there should be a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, adult supervision.
Even adults need supervision for this one.
Right. Other adult supervision.
So where did your interest in throwing sharp objects, throwing knives and other sharp objects begin? And when we talk about throwing knives, we have to clarify, we're not just throwing them aimlessly, right?
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. No. So generally we throw throwing knives, or we throw sharpened tomahawks, and we're going to throw them into a stump of wood. Okay. So that's generally you're going to throw into something that's hard. I mean, this is a phenomenon. Have you guys seen these like places that you can go and throw axes, or is that just in Texas? Okay.
No, that's
cool.
a thing.
That's a thing. Yeah. I know that it's around, but I just didn't know how universal it is. So it's kind of like that idea, or that kind of I guess that's the hobby. And so it's funny because when I was, oh my goodness, in middle school, I mean, this is 20 years ago, way back when, my granddad had this man. He wanted to be a Native American more than anything probably in the world, and so he had come across this group that was doing Civil War reenactments and mountain man rendezvous.
Nice.
That's a little bit, yeah, exactly. So like he had buckskins, he had a teepee, he had muzzle loaders that we got to shoot and things like that. I went with him a couple of times. I usually didn't get a chance to go because of scheduling and things like that, but I went a couple of times, and that's one of the things that they would do is they would have knife throwing, where you're throwing something that's about the size of a Bowie knife. I mean, it's a foot long, and it's just this big, heavy chunk of steel. And then you're throwing these tomahawks that are about close to 18 inches handle length and weigh a couple of pounds, So, I mean, they're real, weapons kind of a deal. And when we would go to these mountain man rendezvous, like fur trappers, that kind of a deal, people basically just grown-ups playing dress up, which is, I mean, that's cool. And that's a hobby, right? I mean, y'all should talk to somebody about that. But
that would be fun.
So they would get together and they'd have these contests to see, who could, stick the most, tomahawks into the chunk of wood, or they would staple a playing card up there. And if you could split the playing card, then you got a point, or whatever, however it went. And so I did that, like I said, when I was in middle school. I had thrown out, I think probably 3 tomahawks in my entire life. And then we went to something that was very similar to that a few years ago. We were just out in, Victoria, Texas, somewhere around there, Goliad, I think. And they had a similar thing where there's an actual historic fort, and they had these guys that were camping out there, and they were all wearing their old timey clothes, and they were out there throwing knives and tomahawks. And I said, man, that that's something that's kind of cool. So I bought a tomahawk to throw off of Amazon, and then a traditional throwing knife off of Amazon. This is not a paid endorsement. And I just never got around to building a target or anything like that. Fast forward a couple of years. Now we've moved out into the country, and our boys are doing a scouting program called Trail Life. Mm-hmm. And so out of the blue, summer camp gets canceled. And they say, we're going to do just kind of a 1 day only in-house kind of like, we're going to make our own summer camp. And so they went around to the kids and they said, what are some things that you guys want to do? And one of my kids, out of the blue, don't know where he pulled it from, said, I'd like to throw knives and tomahawks. And the troop leader looks at me and he goes, that's something you think we can get together? And I'm like, I mean, I've already got the stuff for it. I just got to go, find a stump of wood and, get the chainsaw out and cut it down and everything like that and set it up on a target stand. So, I was the one that got to teach that. And so I spent hours until my shoulder hurt figuring out just exactly how to do this and how to do, 'cause I don't want to look like an idiot out here in front of these kids that are as young as 7 and as old as high school. And so I've got to at least be able to consistently, make it stick in the wood. And we started off throwing tomahawks, which are actually pretty easy because they're real top heavy. And so they turn end over end. The knife is a little tougher. And then I was watching a YouTube video, again, not a paid sponsorship, but I was watching a YouTube video, and there was a guy that had taken butter knives like you have in your drawers at home, and an angle grinder, and he had kind of sharpened the point at the end, and he had a video on how to throw butter knives. And I was like, that's the wildest, craziest thing I've ever seen. And so now, I mean, like I said, we moved out into the country for the congregation I currently serve. And so in our backyard now, we've got a tomahawk target that we throw hawk set and knives and butter knives and, just fun stuff like that. So we got all kinds of fun in the backyard out here in Warda. But that's kind of the background on it. I know I took up way too much time, but yeah, that's how I got into it. So I've been doing this now for about 3 or 4 months, and I just love it.
I have so many questions. This is basically like darts, but on a way bigger kind of caliber, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And the sharp objects throwing it at a target. But what kind of skill is actually involved? Because I can imagine myself trying to do this with a knife, and I don't see it going very well. I'm imagining that there's some skill that's involved in learning how to do this successfully.
It's funny. I always, when I was teaching the kids this, I basically told all the kids, from Trail Life, I said, I am not much of a golfer, but there's one thing that I thought was kind of the key to the very minimal success that I had when I attempted to play golf. And that was, I tried to do the exact same swing every single time. And so, then if I switch to a different club, or if I need to turn to the left or the right, it's not that I'm doing something different with my arms. It's that I'm just going to pick up my body and turn it a little bit. Like I said, I'm not a golfer. So if there's anybody that's listening and is a golfer, and I just explained that terribly, just pretend that I didn't bring up golf. But so my deal with knife throwing and hawk throwing is that I always try to do the exact same motion. I recently, we also have a Lutheran high school here in Central Texas. And I got to teach some of the high schoolers. I'm teaching some of them New Testament during the day. And then they had a short retreat a few weeks ago. And so I got a chance to teach them tomahawks. That was so cool. Nice. And so these high school kids are up there, and you watch them, they just try to muscle the thing. It's like, well, if I throw it really hard, it'll work. And that's exactly the wrong way to think about it. It's just a smooth, fluid motion where you're almost just you're going to get it started on the path because it's spinning. That's the difference between darts, is that when you throw a dart, you're basically pointing the dart where you want it to go, and you're going to release it kind of like you would an arrow. Generally speaking, there are some people who can throw knives without any rotation. I don't think you could do that with a tomahawk. But there are some people. I have not figured that out yet. That's on my to-do list. But as far as throwing tomahawks and throwing knives the way that I do, it's all about getting the exact same repeatable motion. And then after that, it just becomes a matter of, if it's rotating too much on me, and so it's hitting on the top of the tomahawk instead of right where the blade is, then I need to scoot in about a half a step. right? And so it's a lot more just fine tuning that way, and you get a feel for it the more that you do it. But that's kind of a probably too long answer to your question.
I'm imagining the physics in my head and trying to figure out how to keep it from, like, how to make sure that the blade is hitting the target as opposed to any other part of the tomahawk or the knife even.
Well, the important thing is that you don't want it to have any twist in it. If it's got twist in it, you're almost guaranteed that there's no way it's going to stick. That's with the tomahawk, right? And so the most important thing is to just have a straight back behind your shoulder motion and then straight forward motion, because 95% of the people that I've taught, if they try to bring it back behind their head, like you would with throwing a football or something like that, if you have any kind of twist to it, there's no chance. So it's just a straight back, straight forward, and then you just kind of release it while you're pointing at the target, and it just tumbles through the air. And then it's there is so much satisfaction from, especially if you've had trouble getting it to stick, man, that first time that it just sinks into that wood, a quarter inch or so, and you're just like thunk. Okay. And then you got to do it 1,000 more times. That's just the way it works.
Well, I would imagine, much like archery and other hobbies or sports, that, I don't know, is this technically a sport? Is it counted as a sport? It's not an Olympic sport yet, right?
Probably not. I haven't looked it up.
I'm sure it's in some like extreme game thing you can find online somewhere.
Yeah.
That safety is important.
Of course.
When you're teaching the boys at Trail Life or the students at the high school, what are some important safety issues that you cover before you actually hand them sharp objects to throw?
I mean, it's the same kind of deal that we teach when we teach firearms, is that there's, one person on the line at a time, that you check your surroundings before you do anything that could harm anybody, because, I mean, you're swinging a tomahawk behind you, kind of back behind your back there. And so you want to make sure that the people have distance, and kind of what we say at the gun range is that everybody's a safety officer. And so everybody is responsible for everybody's safety. And so that includes the person who's got the sharp implement in their hands. That includes everybody that's standing around also, and we basically just kind of, if you're going to go down range and retrieve, whatever stuck in the wood or whatever's all in the ground all around it, you need to make sure that nobody else is going to step up to the line to throw. So it's a lot of it is just common sense, but unfortunately that's not as common nowadays as it used to be.
We're continuing our hobby series here on the Coffee Hour. Our guest today, the Reverend Dustin Beck, pastor at Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Warda, Texas. And I never thought I'd say it. We're talking about throwing sharp objects.
Oh, yeah.
On the Coffee Hour. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that, to live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
Yep, we're talking about sharp objects, not just sharp objects, but throwing sharp objects as part of the hobby series today on the Coffee Hour. But not randomly, not dangerously, certainly doing it in a safe way as part of the hobby series with Pastor Dustin Beck of Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Warda, Texas. And Pastor Beck, before we went to the break there, we were talking a little bit about teaching kids. You were teaching the boys at Trail Life and high school students there at, is it Faith Lutheran High School in Central Texas?
That's the one, yes, sir.
Yeah, teaching those great students there at a recent retreat as well. And you were talking about the importance of safety and your role in teaching them. Who taught you? Has anyone been influential or taught you? You mentioned watching some YouTube videos, or have there been other people that have influenced you in throwing knives or tomahawks?
So, I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I mean, that time that I went out with my granddad, I mean, he had never thrown a tomahawk that day. And so, neither had I, obviously. And so they did kind of give us, like, here are the steps. And so basically the type of tomahawk that we're throwing, kind of the big, Native American, like I said, 18-inch handle kind of a deal, and the Bowie knife style throwing knives, because they don't look quite like the ones that you see in movies and things like that for throwing. I mean, it's a bigger, heftier knife, but the general rule of thumb is 5 steps, just normal paces from the target for a knife, and about 7 steps for the tomahawk. And so, I mean, that was really just all that I had to kind of jog my memory on. And I think I looked that up on the internet, just like how many paces for to throw a tomahawk. But the cool thing about that is that if you add 3 paces for the tomahawk, you can turn the hawk around backwards and you can get a 1.5 spin stick, and the tomahawk will actually wind up upside down in the target, which is totally cool. That's a ton of fun. And same thing if you go forward by 3 paces, you can do the same thing. You turn the hawk around backwards, so the blade is facing you when it leaves your hand, and it'll do a half spin. And you can do the same thing with knives. I mean, every about 2.5 steps or so that you go forward or back, you either grip it by the handle or you grip it by the blade. And when you throw it, when you chuck it, it winds up stuck in, and it's either doing a full spin if it leaves your hand and you're grasping it by the handle, it'll be a full spin you're attempting, and if you're holding onto the blade, it'll be a half spin or a 1.5 spin or a 2.5 spin. So
how do you throw it
more than you asked for?
How do you throw it by the blade and not like slice your hand open?
Hey, great question. So throwing knives that are specifically built for throwing, like the one that I've got that I keep talking about that looks like a big Bowie knife, it is about 1/4 of an inch thick. I mean, it is this big, thick blade. And I would say on its edge that most knives are used for cutting, it is about 1/8 of an inch thick. So it is not coming down to a sharp edge anywhere, with one exception, and that is the point. And so that knife is only to be used for throwing. It will not cut anything. I mean, you could use it to, I guess, mash potatoes or something, but it is pointy and very, very dull. And so if you you can squeeze it as hard as you want from around the blade, and no danger of doing any kind of damage like that.
Now I feel a lot better about doing this, knowing that I won't slice my hand open.
Right. And Sarah, you could even wear a helmet if you thought that would help.
It might help. I wear helmets for a lot of things. So speaking of slicing hands open, have you made any mistakes? Are there mistakes that you've learned from in all of this process?
The only thing, have I lost any digits? No. The only mistake that I've made, and this is actually funny because one of the guys he's graduated high school, he's graduated college, he's actually he's gotten his DCE degree, and he's waiting for his placement now. Pandemic time, everything's weird, but he's part of Trail Life, and so he came back and he was there. And this is one of my buddies, Dylan, and not my son Dylan. That's a whole nother deal, but. Dylan goes and he throws a tomahawk, and Dylan's a big, tall guy, and he's athletic. He hauls off and he throws the tomahawk. He throws it under the target, and he knocks I kind of basically just built a tripod. I screwed 2 2x4s as front legs into the back of the target, and then I've got a third leg that's on a hinge that, so it'll fold down flat, but it kind of, it makes like a little tripod. He underthrows it, and he hits the back leg, knocks that back leg out. It falls down flat and, busts up the hinge that it's on. And this is like at 9:00 in the morning on our day of teaching tomahawks to kids. And I'm like, okay, so I have to get back out my, fortunately I brought some tools, and I was able to piece it back together, and it held. But that's the only real mishap that I've had, is destroying targets. And I actually, I've been doing so much throwing that the chunk of wood that I had that was about 4 inches thick, and probably the size of a steering wheel, I actually, I threw my big knife at it the other day, and it took a big chunk out of the bottom of it. Like not quite a third of it, probably 1/4 of it just came out. So I had to source some more wood. And so, that's been the other mishap. I mean, it's all target stuff. Everything else is great.
That's good.
Yeah.
So fortunately, no trips to the ER or urgent care. That's fantastic.
Everything's good.
Safety is first. Safety is important. How has this hobby of throwing knives and tomahawks butter knives. How has it served you in your vocations?
Oh goodness. I think we could maybe classify hobbies into two categories. There are useful hobbies, such as like maybe I enjoy reading and that makes me a better storyteller in terms of sermon writing and things like that. Maybe I enjoy, fitness and exercise. Andy, I know you like to do a little bit of getting out and sweating. Maybe I do that, and so that gives me the ability to better perform, any task that I'm trying to do, whether it's helping to move pews and rearrange things, or carrying a stack of hymnals, or whatever it happens to be. And then there are hobbies that they're just hobbies for hobby's sake, and I think that that's part of leisure, is that sometimes we need to just get away from the productivity side of things. Sometimes we need to just be able to unwind. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I love, I've got several folks that have said similar things to me, so I'm not going to actually quote somebody, but just the idea of being able to have something that's measurable, something that I can practice at, that I can invest some time into, that isn't going to make me feel like a better or a worse pastor, husband, father, etc. Although, hanging out with the kids and, shooting BB guns and slingshots and throwing, sharp implements, that does make me feel like a better father, because that's a blast, and the kids love it, and it pulls them off of video games, and they get to go outside and things like that. But I really think this hobby is just about, I want to get better at something that there is no need for me to get better at. That's part of the fun of hobbies, is just to say, you know what, I'm going to go do that thing, or I'm going to go hike up that mountain, or I'm going to go, whatever it happens to be. So I guess that's as close as I can get to an answer. It maybe helps in my vocation as a father. I don't know that I'm a better pastor because I can throw a tomahawk, but it helps me to relieve stress. How's that?
Hey, there's value in that. That makes people better people when they can relieve stress in ways that are maybe productive, maybe not, but at least healthy.
Yeah.
Do you have insights for newbies? You've mentioned a couple of things of how you got started. Do you have any advice for people who now want to go start throwing knives in their backyard?
We live in the YouTube generation. We live in the YouTube era, where if there's something that you don't know how to do, somebody knows how to do that, and they have filmed themselves doing it and put it on the internet for you to just kind of, click YouTube and type in beginner tomahawk throwing. That's TOMAHAWK, or beginner knife throwing. I was throwing that out there for you, Andy. But really and truly, when I go to work on my car, I know nothing about car. I know very few things about cars. And I'll just look up, hey, how to remove the fuel tank from an 88 Ford Bronco 2, or, things like that. And there are videos for all of this. And so I really just, in fact, that's one of, I guess, a minor goal of mine, is kind of self-improvement through many and various hobbies. I would like to be a jack of all trades. I would like to have the opportunity to just do as many fun things as possible, not to take away from my ministry, my life with my family, any of the other goals that I've got. But, sometimes it's just fun to do things, to be able to say, yeah, that's a thing that I can do. Yeah, that's cool,
And I would add to that, just from the pictures. One of the reasons I knew about your knife throwing is because you're generous in sharing pictures of the time that you spend with the kids throwing knives. And I think, just from what you've shared today, that I could imagine how that would help you as a pastor, because as a shepherd, you're spending time with them, whether they're your kids or the kids at the high school, or the boys in trail life, helping you in all of those vocations, as a father, as a husband, as a pastor. I don't know. Do you do that as date night with your wife? Go throw knives?
That would be so fun.
Oh, if she was in this room, she would say, "What's date night?" Yeah.
She's just wondering where all of her butter knives went.
Exactly. No, we did go buy some very inexpensive butter knives that we did not already own. So I didn't feel like she would appreciate it if I filed down the tip on them to point. And, so no, we have. She's gone out in the backyard with us a couple of times, and she's thrown a little bit. But I don't think, I mean, maybe one day we would go to one of those establishments where you have a supper and drink beverages and throw implements at the wall. I don't know, maybe. I'm not opposed to it, but from here you got to drive an hour to get to one, so backyard's more convenient.
But I could see how but just that quality time that you're spending with the kids that you're teaching, learning more about the sheep that you shepherd, just as you were spending time with your grandfather too, and that relationship was being built during that time as well. You, as a pastor or as a father, as a troop leader, any of those, you're learning more about those you serve by spending time with them.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily, learning a skill that you may or may not necessarily need.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When I first started teaching the kids, I asked them a question. I said, what is a good reason not to throw a knife or a tomahawk? And, their number one answer, of course, was because it's dangerous. And I'm like, well, that's a good answer, but what's an even better reason not to throw a knife or a tomahawk? And they thought about it for a while and they finally got the answer. They said, because then you don't have your knife or your tomahawk. If you're hunting with it or things like that, you throw your weapon away, then you don't have it. I said, so why do we throw tomahawks? And this little kid in the back goes, because it's fun. I said, yes, that's absolutely it. We do this because it's fun, because it's something to pass the time, and it's something we can compete against each other and say, hey, look what I just did. I bet you can't do better. And then they say, yeah, I can do better because I practiced for the last 3 hours, that kind of a deal. It's just fun.
And it's outside. That's the best part.
It's social. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been fun. And as we shared before, always make sure that there's adult supervision and maybe those supervising the adults as well when practicing this hobby. Our guest today, the Reverend Dustin Beck, pastor of Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Warda, Texas. Thanks for sharing your hobby of knife and tomahawk throwing with us today on the Coffee Hour.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.